warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Hilmi bin Zainudin, and I will represent my team group for demonstration on lab vehicle brake system lab 2 master cylinder inspection, removal and refitting. So today I will demonstrate the parts for the master cylinder, and I will be using Pro 2 Kelisa for this demonstration video. So for the overhauling master cylinder procedure, I will be using my friend's video to demonstrate how the assembly of the master cylinder and overhauling procedure of the master cylinder. So without further ado, let's begin. Okay, to begin this lab demonstration, firstly we need to know the system of the master cylinder. So I will first explain what is the system of the master cylinder. So as you can see here, this is the brake booster. The brake booster is connected to the brake pedal of the vehicle, and the brake booster from the brake booster is also connected to the master cylinder. As you can see here, this is the brake booster. The big round thing is the brake booster, and this thing over here is the master cylinder. As you can see, the master cylinder is connected to the brake booster with two nuts tight on the side of the brake booster. So for the master cylinder here, inside the master cylinder we have two pistons. So we call the first piston and the second piston. The first piston is on the rear side of the master cylinder here, is for the rear brake tire, and the second piston, the front side of the master cylinder, is for the front brake tire. Okay, so on top of the master cylinder here we have the reservoir tank, which contains the brake fluid or the brake oil. So that is the reservoir tank. And on the master cylinder here, as you can see, we have the brake line. So we have two brake line on the side, and we have one brake line here in front, on the front side of the master cylinder. Okay, so the brake line for the front side is for the front tire, while both sides on the side of the master cylinder is for the rear tire brake. Okay, and the side here you can see a wiring connected to the reservoir tank, and this wire is the sensor or the fluid indicator, which is the fluid inside the reservoir tank. And this sensor will relay will relay data to the driver, which if the fluid is not enough or there is a leakage, then the indicator will light up saying that the fluid inside the reservoir tank is not sufficient for driving or for braking system. Okay, so that is the system of the master cylinder. And now I will be talking about the procedure of removing the master cylinder. So for the first step of removing the master cylinder, we need to empty the reservoir tank. So the reservoir tank here, which contains the brake fluid, we need to empty while using an oil fluid extractor tank. And after the fluid inside this reservoir tank is empty, and we can now remove the brake line. So as you can see right here, we have three brake line. We can loose the nut on the three side of this brake line, and after that, after we move the brake line, we can remove the brake fluid indicator, which is the sensor right on the side of the reservoir tank here, and we can just unplug this wiring. And next, we can now loose the nut that is connected on the both side of the brake booster to the master cylinder, and that is how we remove the master cylinder from the car. Okay, for this next video, I will be using my friend's video, which is the procedure of overhauling the master cylinder, and I will be explaining while the video is playing. Okay, for the master cylinder dismantle procedure, firstly we need to take a screwdriver and we can loose the screw that connects the tank reservoir to the master cylinder. And after we remove the screw, we can just unplug the tank reservoir from the master cylinder by pulling it apart, and just unplug the seal from both sides of the in port and out port of the tank reservoir. And next, we can remove the C-clip from inside of the master cylinder, but before that we can unscrew the piston stopper from the side of the master cylinder using a screwdriver. And for the C-clip removal, we can use a nose bend plier to remove the C-clip from inside of the master cylinder. And next, for the piston, to get the piston out from inside of the master cylinder, use a flat surface to knock the piston out from the master cylinder. If the second piston is not come out from the master cylinder, repeat the knocking process until the second piston is out from the master cylinder. That is how we dismantle the master cylinder. And now we can move to the next step, inspection of the piston. And as you can see here, we have two pistons, front side and the rear side. So from visual inspection from this video, we can say that the piston, both of the piston is in bad condition. Both are quite rusty and are not suitable for user to be used condition. And from this piston, we can say that it is very rusty and could be a hazard to the driver, because if a rusty piston is used, it can make the master cylinder jam and could be really harmful for the driver. So the recommended condition is to replace with a new piston. So after both bad piston is changed to a new and more safer and usable piston, we can insert the first piston, which is the front piston, into the master cylinder. For easier process, we can lubricate inside of the master cylinder with an oil brake or brake oil. And to avoid incorrect assembly, we can make sure to insert the stopper in the middle of the first piston. So this action is done by carefully inserting the first piston, and we can look through the side of the master cylinder hole, and after the front of the piston has passed through the hole, we can insert the stopper, like for example like this video. So carefully insert the first piston. Use a screwdriver for easier insert process, and when that is done, we can just screw in the stopper. Test the function of the piston before inserting the second piston. Just insert the second piston with a push of the finger, and after that is done, we can use the bend nose plier to insert the C-clip, and we can test the piston function. If all assembly is done correctly, we can move on to the next stage, which is inserting the two seal for the reservoir tank. And after both seal is plugged in, we can connect the reservoir tank to the master cylinder. Make sure the front port and the rear port of the tank reservoir is connect to the master cylinder correctly. After that is done, we can screw in the hole that connects the tank reservoir to the master cylinder. After that is done, just close the cap of the tank reservoir, and that is how we assemble the master cylinder. For this last part of the video, I will explain about the assembly of the master cylinder to the brake booster on the car. But before that, we need to measure the depth of the piston using a vernier caliper. So from the result of this video, we get 19.87 millimeter of depth in the master cylinder. And next, we need to measure the push rod on the brake booster. Apply the same procedure of measurement, and we get 19.74 millimeter length of push rod. So when compared to the depth of the piston inside of the master cylinder, we can say we have a clearance of about 0.13 millimeter, and this clearance is good for the master cylinder connection to the push rod, because we don't want to apply mass amount of pressure to the master cylinder. So with this clearance, the master cylinder can function properly. And for if the piston depth and the push rod length is good condition to assemble, we can start the assembly by firstly insert it through the bolt of the brake booster, and tighten the two nut from side of the master cylinder with a spanner. And after both of the nut is tightened, we can assemble the brake line. In this video, we can see that we assemble the front brake line first before moving to the next step, which is assemble the brake line for the side from the side of the master cylinder. After both of the brake line is assembled, we can insert back the brake fuel that we extracted from the tank reservoir. So we can insert the brake fuel back into the tank reservoir and plug in the brake fluid indicator. And if all is done correctly, we should have a new master cylinder in good condition, ready to be used. Thank you.
Nuopurista kuuluu se polokan tahti, jalkani pohjii kutkutti. Ievan